The Marty and Laura Show is brought to you by Veterinary Village. With locations throughout Wisconsin, Veterinary Village is dedicated to enhancing the quality of animal and human lives today and into the future. Welcome to the Marty and Laura Show. And you guys on video are going to notice my friend to my right is not Marty. So this is my friend Lance Woodruff. Marty is on vacation right now. So we are going to bring you some amazingly cool information from Lance about aquariums. Not everybody is in a position to own a cat or a dog. Or wants to own a cat or a dog. And so we thought it would be really cool to be able to occasionally drop in some information about other pets that you can have in your home. And fish and aquariums are so not in my, like you thought guys thought I didn't know anything about cats. I feel like the only thing I know about fish is like trout fishing. So this was great, and Lance is going to bring us some really cool information on that. So, welcome, Lance. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Pretty good. How you doing?
Cool. So give us a little kind of like quick 411 on your background with fish and aquariums and how you got this like really cool hobby.
Long time ago, for about 10 years, I was doing, I managed aquarium stores basically. I started off at a place called Brett's Tropical Fish in Thousand Oaks, California, that the guy was super knowledgeable. So he really sparked my interest. I worked at a fish store in Lawrence, Kansas briefly before that, and that's where I kind of got the spark. But when I really started learning about fish was when I got that first job there. And, I mean, from that point on, I spent the next 10 years doing custom aquariums for everything from freshwater, saltwater, reef tanks, plant tanks. I mean, there's just a lot to
Oh my
with
gosh.
aquarium.
Okay, cool. All right, you're our fish guy. So let's start with really basic, like, this isn't a goldfish in a bowl like we saw on TV back in the day. So
Sure. Those are actually
get it
harder than
started.
aquariums because you have to clean them more often, honestly.
Okay. 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 So let's get started with, kind of what are some of the basic types of aquariums,
Mhm.
types of fish, the filtration that goes into that, all that kind of stuff.
It's a process. I mean, basically, what I always kind of walk people through is like, first of all, what space do you have available? I mean, that's kind of important
Mm,
because these things they can be pretty big, anywhere from 10-gallon tanks, which aren't that big, obviously, to, I mean, 500 gallons. I mean, there's no limit, really, honestly, if we're able to pay the money. So, we did everything as far as the sizes and everything and types of fish. So, I start people with the space you have available first because if you only have a little bit of space available, you're getting small fish. So,
right.
and you're probably not going to get a saltwater aquarium because saltwaters kind of require more space.
Okay.
With there's exceptions to everything. There's like a micro reef you could do, but that's
How
a
do
whole
you
other. We'll
okay,
talk.
okay, stop before we so this is like this I told you I know nothing. How do you have a saltwater tank? Like, do you go to the ocean and get some water and bring it home? Like, how does that
Uh,
work?
you know, they actually some places will sell what's called Catalina water, is most commonly called that, where it is actually from the ocean. But really, most people they'll go to the fish store or have something installed in their house that it's a reverse osmosis system, and you add the salt and mix it up in like a barrel or a bucket or something like that, and then you can just do your water changes with that. So it's you don't have to go to the ocean.
I mean, like Morton salt out of a can.
Oh no, it's in a special salt as well, and there's different qualities of salt too. Because I mean, the ocean has every element in the periodic table on it. So basically, the quality of the salt that you're buying, the more expensive ones will have just more of those elements, and cheaper ones will have less. So.
Fascinating. Okay. All right. And so the fish store is your friend. Got it.
Well, most of them are, yeah. I mean, you want to find a good, reputable place for sure. Who wants to take care of the fish and make sure that you have, their best interest in mind instead of just like some of the chain. They're not. They just kind of throw it out there and see what hits. And you kind of have to learn it on your own a little bit. If you get a good fish store, a lot of them will teach you, they'll help you. I mean, it's required to kind of know a lot of this stuff,
Right.
just so you can help the people. 'Cause it's a lot to know, honestly. It's not as simple as a box of water with fish in it. You know,
Well,
it's a
that's what I said to you. I'm like, I don't know, box of water. That's what I got.
and it's normal. I think most people just kind of see that it's just something floating around. They don't think about the mechanics of it,
Right. Right.
and and that's basically the filtration is probably the most important part, and this the setup of an aquarium. Like when you first start off an aquarium, it goes through. You have to start some fish to kind of start what's called cycle. And cycle is basically refers to like a 6 week period, on average 6 weeks, where your tank's chemistry is adjusting. It's growing the necessary bacteria that it needs on the filter to process all the fish waste and stuff. So you have an ammonia spike, then you have a nitrite spike, and then finally everything levels off. And what you do is you bring a water sample into your fish store, and they'll test it out for you. And when they see that that nitrite level's gone down, your tank is stable at that point, and you can start treating it like a normal aquarium. You know, so.
Okay. All right.
But that first 6 weeks is iffy. You want to get
Right.
cheap, inexpensive fish that are hardy, that can
Right.
just kind of get you through that cycle, and it's challenging. So, but after that, it gets easier.
Okay. All right. So let's just give us a setup. Let's just say
Sure,
I'm just like poor and I can afford a 10-gallon tank.
sure.
I got a box for my fish. So
Mhm.
so you're gonna buy a particular kind of filtration for a freshwater tank. And
Sure.
is that when we put the pretty stuff in there to make it look like a coral reef, or when how does that work?
Decoration's really all up to the person. There's really kind of no right or wrong to that. Coral, there is a little bit of wrong to that because it can actually raise your pH. So, because it's calcium based, so it hardens the water and ends up raising your pH. So,
Uh,
with freshwater, we tend not to put coral. People do. It's not going to necessarily kill your fish, but it's not ideal.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you're going to get there's three types of different types of filtration. There's biological, mechanical, and chemical. And the
Okay.
biological is the most important. That's where your bacteria grows. So a good filter is going to have. There's under gravel filters. There's biowheel filters. There's just a bunch of different types of filters. There's no. You just choose what's better for your setup.
Mhm.
But the most important thing is it has an area where the bacteria grows that never gets cleaned off. That is your stability of the aquarium. So like people who actually like take the whole thing apart and scrub the whole thing out and everything, they're actually doing a lot more harm than good. What you really want to do is after it's established, after that first 6 weeks, you're going to, it's this little vacuum, it's a little tube basically where you have to kind of like get in there and you're vacuuming out the gravel. And you only take out about 10 to 25% of the water at the most. You just drain it into a bucket and then you're done. And you put the dechlorinator in there, fill it back up again, and you're done. That's it. It doesn't have to be as complicated as a lot of people think. So.
Okay. That's good to know. Um so, I have seen pretty pictures of fish on the internet, and the little goldfish all the way up to the fancy winged flying fish things. So, in my little 10-gallon, not very fancy buff box of fish, what kind of fish am I liable to get to have?
You still have a lot of options, honestly, that doesn't even include the live plants. If you want to go live plants, that's another option too. But
Okay.
then the smaller families of fish are going to be like your tetras. There's live bearers, which are basically like guppies, swordtails, platies. There's a whole kind of group of fish that have live birth, and they're capable of doing it every 28 days. So with those
Oh,
guys, you want to be careful because your tank can fill up pretty quickly
I
with
was gonna
babies.
I was gonna say,
Um,
how many babies do they have at once?
a lot, and they tend to eat the babies a lot too. So sometimes
Oh,
they're it's fish. It's if it fits in their mouth, they're going to eat it. That's how they think.
oh, okay. So how do I only get one sex of fish?
Well, the only most a lot of small fish, unfortunately, you can't really tell male and female, but the live bears actually you can with swordtails, platies, the guppies, all those things. On the very bottom fin, the anal fin kind of thing, there's a spike that the males have, and the females have a full fin. That's the easiest way to tell the difference. So.
Okay, so I could go to the fish store and say, I only want girl fish.
Sure. It depends on the type of fish, but yeah, if it's a live bearer, then that will be the case. You can tell that
Good,
way.
because I don't want any fish baby eating. I'm not good with that in my
Sure.
tank.
If you provide
So,
enough cover, sometimes they'll survive, but then you have the problem you have so many survive that your tank is just overfull of
right.
fish. So
Right. So that's actually a really good question, Lance. Talk to me about, in my 10-gallon tank, right? Because I'm poor and I just have this little box place to put my fish. How many
sure.
fish can I have in that space? What is over full for that
The
space?
average is thought to be about an inch of fish per gallon. Um, so I mean, most of the fish are maybe about an inch at the most anyway. So
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
they're even smaller, maybe you get a few extra in there. And you could stack it a little bit. Like there's some bottom dwelling fish, like the cory cats, that's always are on the bottom pretty much, or predominantly on the bottom. There's some that are maybe just always on the very top, and then you have most of the fish are going to be middle, middle of the tank type thing. So, uh, I mean, the more fish you put in there, the more you're gonna have to clean it. So it's kind of a balance of like you can keep it kind of lightly stocked and not have to do much maintenance on it. If you put a lot of fish in there and you're feeding all those fish, they're all gonna poop at the end, and you're gonna have to clean it a lot more often. So
Okay. But
it's
you
a
don't
trade
want
off,
to you don't want to clean it so clean that you get rid of your
the
germ
bacteria. Yeah.
bacteria. There we go. Okay, got it. Boy, this is a learning curve. I like this. This is excellent. So we were talking about feeding them. What do you feed them? How often do you feed them? Like, can I be gone for a week and my fish are cool or what?
Yeah, actually, they have automatic feeders you can do,
Mm,
especially for the small fish. They're mainly eating flake food anyway. I mean, giving them a variety is always important just for health and color and things like that. But I mean, there's these little battery-powered fish feeders you put them right atop the aquarium, and they kind of have a little plastic chamber, and they just spin around once a day, and that
mm.
the little hole that's on the top of it will kind of just rotate over the top of the tank, dump some flake out, and then come back up again. So they get their little dose of flake every day, kind of thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how often are you? So I've got my 10 fish in my 10-gallon tank and it gets fed once a day. How often do I clean it then?
Most the rule of thumb is about once a month is kind of the
Oh.
most you really want to push it. Push it. You can go more frequently. More frequently is just better, if anything.
Mhm.
But at least once a month is recommended. So
And so how do I tell if my fish are sick? Like if my fish is
ah,
like upside down in the box, like is
that's
that
the more
that's
obvious sign
bad.
for sure. That's definitely more obvious. The most common thing they get is called ick, and that's short for like it's a Latin name that I don't even want to pronounce it. But they'll get like white little spots over them, like somebody took salt or something and kind of just salted them, and it just clings to their body. Definitely the most common thing. There's some drops you put in the water. You have to pull the carbon out so it doesn't absorb all your medication
Mm.
because that'll be inside your filter, some carbon. So you pull your carbon out, put the drops in the tank to medicate it, and usually it's pretty easy to clear up. I like to do a lot of extra water changes during those times because it helps get the water quality better.
Mhm.
Most of the diseases are brought about by stress or bad water quality. So you want to just reduce the stress if there's fish beating on each other, kind of thing, because they'll pick on each other sometimes. You want to pull the bully out if you can. Bring it back to the fish store, and just give them back to them.
This one's mean. I don't want it anymore.
We got that a lot, honestly. It's one of those things you have to kind of do as a fish store. It's a full service thing where if something's being aggressive, you take it back. You give them credit towards another fish or something, and you find that
This
one
is
that can get over on
not the
something else.
same as dogs. I'm just going to tell
No, there's definitely aggression like every other animal. They have territorial things going on sometimes. I mean, some fish are more peaceful than others. Like the tetras and things, they seem to not care. They like big groups of fish, so they like to school. So they have no territory issues whatsoever. But then you get gouramis sometimes, and two males might want to like the kiss. It looks like, but that's actually fighting.
Okay, so I'm building my tank. 10 gallons, fresh water, nice fish, only girl fish.
Sure. Or tetras, like some fish won't breed necessarily, like the tetras and things like that. There's glassfish. There's lots of other fish that won't necessarily breed in an aquarium, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. The live bears are just kind of notorious for they're just constantly breeding. So, but mostly you can get the tetras are beautiful. Like the neon tetras are very popular. Those have been around for forever. They're the kind of bright blue with the little red in them.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, I think I've seen
there's a
those.
cardinal tetra that looks just like them with the red and blue go all the way through the body. They're even prettier, look very similar. But they're kind of fragile. It's not a fish you would start your aquarium with, but
Mhm.
after it's all cycled, then you can add those guys in there. So
Okay. So do I start my little 10-gallon fish box with like 5 fish? and
Uh,
just like let it settle and then you can add a couple more or
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on the size, but the 3 to 5 fish is pretty standard.
Mm,
Because you have to add something because something has to
right,
start creating waste in the aquarium so
right,
that the bacteria has something to start growing on, basically.
right, right,
So you have your ammonia spikes up, then you grow a nitrous ammonia bacteria that eats all the ammonia out of the water, and it neutralizes that and converts it to nitrite. And then there's another bacteria which is I think nitrospira they figured out, and that it spikes up, it eats all the nitrites out of the water, and that comes back down. And then from that point on, those levels should never come back up again, as long as you don't mess up your filter. Now, there's a nitrate level. That's how you actually measure how dirty your tank is.
right.
So that's
That
something you
was
just
my
bring a
next
sample into
question
your fish store.
when you see them and the water's all cloudy. That's bad, right?
That's basically just your bacteria is floating around on the water column instead of being attached to your filter. That's
Mm.
usually somebody cleaned their filter too well, and then the bacteria get detached and just floats around. So,
Okay, and then does it ever get reattached?
oh yeah, it'll reattach. It just takes a couple days. As long as you have enough of a good enough filter for that all to attach to. I
Mhm.
mean, there's situations where people have a way undersized filter and there's just not enough room for all the bacteria. So then it'll never not be cloudy, you know. So you have to get a better filter maybe. But as long as you give it space, it'll all attach and your water should be crystal clear with that. So
Okay. And you talked earlier about plants that I can put in my cute little fish box.
yes,
So are there some plants that are better, like they like to play in them, or how does that work?
the fish pretty much like all the plants. They like anywhere they can kind of hide and yeah. And plastic's going to be easier, of course. There's lots of good options that look good for plastic, but with the live plants, it's obviously a more natural situation, and the plants themselves are kind of fun to grow because you can get
Mhm.
little plants and grow them up, and they'll spread. And you can take clippings, and anybody who's into plants, it's the same thing, just underwater. So I mean, basically, you're just getting things that aren't going to overgrow the aquarium is kind of the more important part. And then the biggest thing is you want the right lighting for it. Most bulbs or aquariums will come with a like a fluorescent bulb, so you just want to get the bulb with a good spectrum for it that grows plants basically. So you might have to change that bulb. That's the only difference.
Okay. So I got a fancy fluorescent bulb that grows my plants that my fish get to play in.
Sure.
Cool. I like it.
Doggett simplifies the puppy buying journey by connecting families with the perfect breed and responsible, health verified breeders. They are the only breeder marketplace that verifies health clearances and responsible breeding practices. Through their personalized puppy matcher tool and matchmaker services, they educate and guide buyers every step of the way, ensuring a seamless process and a perfect match for their lifestyle. From initial breed consultation to introductions with top breeders, Doggett makes responsible puppy ownership easy and stress-free.
And so if I decide then I've gotten, rich and I've got a bigger house and now I want to have like a giant fancy one. And it's
Sure.
like a saltwater and a reef and a this and a that and like what extra things do you have to then start looking at?
Well, if you're doing saltwater, it's definitely different filtration. And
Okay.
what really good advice with any aquarium, especially for saltwater, is you want to pick your favorite thing and kind of build around that. If it's a certain type of fish that you just have to have, or if it's coral that you want to have,
Mm,
then that pretty much dictates the rest of what you're doing.
okay.
Um, if you want coral, then it's a reef tank, and you're going to stock your tank with about 2/3 live rock. You want to kind of build up a bunch of caves and little platforms for your coral to kind of sit on, and then you have a protein skimmer either hanging off the back, or there's something called a sump that can sit below where you can kind of it's like a sort of like an aquarium below the aquarium, but it's not meant to be fancy. It's just kind of a holding container for your water will kind of flow through there. The pumps that you have will kind of make it flow through there. Your protein skimmer will sit inside of that, and you can add chemicals down there. And basically, what the protein skimmer does is, if you've ever gone to the beach and see that foam that washes up on the beach,
Hmm.
that's basically the natural protein skimming that the ocean does. It's all the small oxygen bubbles. Uh, the protein's attached to those tiny bubbles, and they're basically lifted up out of the water and basically washed up on shore. And the protein skimmer does the same thing. It's a big glass, kind of plastic or glass tube, usually plastic, and there's kind of a cup on top so that you'll adjust your air stone in the main chamber there, and it creates all these bubbles and fills up that whole big chamber. And then there's a cup at the top that, as it kind of starts to thicken up and foam over, it just collects it into like a really nasty smelling sludge. And you basically just dump that out every so often and rinse it out.
Yeah, gross. Okay, cool.
It's under the tank. You don't really smell it, honestly. So
Got to be less stinky than dogs, right? Okay, so in and make sure that I understand this. So when you see water moving in a fish tank,
mhm.
that's for a specific type of tank. I'm not going to have moving water in my little 10-gallon fish
Oh, sure.
box.
You'll have some, but you'll just have less. And now it's called turnover, basically. Like how many gallons your tank is, you want it turned over maybe 10 times per hour, 20 times per hour. There's different kind of ratings for your filters, kind of thing, or how you add your filters. I mean, because they'll all have a certain amount of gallons per hour kind of stamped on the box that tells you how fast it goes. So you want to make sure for freshwater and things like that, you don't need nearly as much. You do want some because that agitation at the top of the water actually creates oxygen for the tank. So that's important for the fish, of course.
Okay.
And then with saltwater, they're used to a lot heavier currents, a lot more turbulence, things like that. So you actually want a lot more current in those type of tanks, especially a reef tank with coral, because that's how they feed all the little phytoplanktons and the little algae and things that they, not algae, but the things that they basically feed off of. That's a whole other thing. The algae is actually inside the tissue of the coral. That's a whole other. You want your brain to explode? That's a good one right there.
Like I can't even keep up already. So I've got this beautiful coral reef. What kind
Sure.
of fishies am I putting in it? And how big is this, like 100 gallons of water?
Uh, Reefs are kind of one of those exceptions where, like, you can do a small, what's called like a micro reef, even in a 10-gallon.
Oh,
They're more challenging. Like the smaller the aquarium for saltwater, the harder it is to maintain because when something goes wrong, it goes wrong really fast.
got it.
So bigger actually gives you a lot more leeway. If something goes wrong, you can catch it quicker. It could save you a lot of money because things don't die so fast. So, but their reef tanks are definitely the most expensive thing there are, and you're going to add the fish that help you maintain it. Like there's a group of fish called tangs that'll eat algae that kind of scrape it off the rock, so they help keep the tank looking clean and getting the
Mhm.
algae off the rocks. Um, and then there's lots of little, small little fish basically that are friendly with all kind of stuff. And then there's fish you definitely don't want to add, like butterflies and some angelfish even. I mean, it's been done. Like everything's been done. There's always the person who's going to like, I did it, and it. Okay, great, it worked for you. I'm glad, but as a general rule of thumb, you don't want to add like the butterflies and the angelfish, the saltwater angelfish, to reef tanks because they actually eat the coral. Or even like the triggers, which are like the bigger, more aggressive fish,
Mm.
they'll eat all your small fish that are helping you maintain everything. So
Uh,
it's usually a generally more peaceful environment with the reef kind of thing. Whereas if you have a fish only, you definitely need a bigger tank. There's no exceptions there, really. Very little. I mean, of course, there's always an exception, but for the most part, I do the same thing. Pick your favorite fish. If it's a beautiful angelfish, they get along with a lot of different stuff. You can have we'll give you choices based on what your favorite fish is, kind of thing. That's why it's important to have a knowledgeable fish store because if you don't know what goes with what,
right,
it can be a problem.
right,
So
right. Okay, so fancy fishes, pick your favorite fish. So let's talk cost.
sure.
My 10-gallon box of fish, how much does that cost? And then run it up to a fancy coral reef doodad with all the pretty fishes.
A 10-gallon fish tank. There's I know there's one brand that used to, and now it's been a little while since I was a manager of
Yeah.
stores, so I know there's a lot of other options out there now. But Eclipse was a brand that was coming out where everything was kind of all self-contained into the lid, so it gave you a good deal because you had your plastic tank with the lid and the light all installed,
Mhm.
and made it pretty simple. And the only thing you have to add is a heater. You want a constant temperature. We'll get to that in a minute, I guess, too. But so your filter, the heater, the gravel, all the basic stuff, the chemicals, you're going to spend a couple $100 probably. Most of the stuff's a one-time cost. Like your monthly maintenance is going to be very, very little. But your one-time cost, you're going to spend $200-300 pretty easily, especially depending on decorations. Because
Even for
decorations, you
just
can
this
go.
little my box of fish.
Sure. Well, I mean, the filters will run you, $60 to $100, depending on the type you
Okay.
want. The eclipses were nice back in. This has been a while, but it used to be like $100. You can get like the whole thing all as one thing.
Right.
I don't know what it is now, as far as price ways, but it's probably not a whole lot more. So those saves you deals. So you get like the eclipse, for instance, if you got that for, say it's $150 now, I don't even know. You'll add your heater in there if that's like another $30. Maybe it's more now, but all these, they're pretty close. The gravel's not much, it's about $10 maybe for a bag of gravel. Now, if you have an undergravel filter, you want a thicker layer because of the type of filter you have. If you don't have that type of filter, you want maybe a thinner layer, just enough to maybe kind of sink your plants into to it holds it down. That's kind of what the gravel's doing. But other than that, and then just decorations, it's just whatever you like as far as plants. And, fake ones are easier. They're like anywhere from like $3 to $12, depending on the height of them, basically.
And then all the way up to, I assume there is no,
Oh,
top limit for
I'll give you a good
wreath.
example. I had a customer who had a Porsche and a 180-gallon reef tank, and he said they cost him the same every month.
Oh my God. So the cost of the reef tank is in the, what's
hundreds
the
of
monthly
thousands.
cost?
Well, it's definitely the highest to set up, and then monthly cost. You have a lot of chemicals and things you add.
Okay.
And then, your water changes are more frequent because you want to do them every week with a reef tank. Only like 10%. You're not changing the whole thing. You're draining 10%, putting it right back in again.
Right.
But your salt's not cheap if you get a good quality. It's his monthly cost. It was about the same as owning a Porsche, I guess, between the car payment and the insurance and all that stuff. So I don't know what he was paying, but cheap.
Okay. So I am never going to be rich enough to have one of those. I'm sticking to my 10-gallon box of fish. I like this.
I worked at a store in California. We had a lot of celebrities and directors and producers, and so there was a lot of people who had some good money that
Sure.
had no problem spending that kind of stuff. So,
well, sure. That's not me. And some of our listeners, you know what? If you have that kind of change, go for it.
Sure.
Is there like an organization? Can I put in the show notes stuff? Information where people can go read more about this? Is there an like the American Kennel Club is for dogs, Tika is for cats. What is it for fish?
I don't know that there is one, honestly, that I know of. Not that I'm aware of.
Interesting.
Maybe there's been one since I stopped doing that job, but there never was one back in the day. That's for sure.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
It was kind of a free for all, honestly. That was one of the things that you had to do as the second store I worked at in California. The owners had a challenge of just finding a reputable source of fish because the Philippines for a while were just dropping cyanide in the water, and whatever floated to the surface, they grab it, and if it recovered, they sold it, and if it didn't, they just so it was like you had to stop buying it from the Philippines just so they would change their practices. And I think they have now, as far as I know, because it wasn't good for even the fish that survived were messed up enough where they'd never lived very long. So
that's a really fascinating concept. Talking about, I assume there's endangered species and there's things like that you have to there's rules.
Sure. Well, even environmentally, like in California, you can't own piranha because if you turned them loose in the environment, they'd survive. So nobody wants that.
That'd be bad. I've been in the Bahamas. I say no to piranhas.
See, you can own them in like the northern states because it's not a problem because they'll never survive the winter because the water gets way too cold. So it's not. They can own them. So.
Interesting. Check your local listings.
That's kind of it. It's regional for sure.
Oh my God. Okay. So what other things do we need to be considering with our box of fish here that we might have missed?
It really kind of depends on what type of fish, because the choices as far as your type of fish it's insane how many different types of. I'll give you a good example. Like for freshwater, if you're having the smaller fish, it's called a community tank. You have like your tetras, your libraries, all the peaceful guys. Angelfish are kind of one of those in-between fish where they're sometimes mellow enough to get along with all the little small guys, but they're sometimes mean enough where you can put them with the big baddies, that are beating each other up, and they hold their own, So there's some fish that are kind of could go either way. Central South Americans are a good example. Like they're all the bigger, more aggressive kind of fish from Central
Mhm.
South America,
Mhm.
uh, and they're kind of unique because of the colors they have,
Mm.
or it's kind of more spotted fluorescent type colors and things, and but they're usually more unique shapes and kind of interesting that way. Then you have African cichlids, which are really colorful. As far as freshwater fish, they're the most colorful option you have, but they're also very aggressive. So you want a bigger tank with lots of caves and territory and things for them to live on, basically, because they'll claim their little area and they'll duke it out if it's too many in one area. So
Okay,
um,
a fish fight. I'm trying to envision a fish fight. I just am not seeing it.
it's not an interesting thing. It's really just one fish harassing another one until it just dies. That's kind of
Oh
what
my
ends up
gosh.
happening. Yeah,
Okay. Uh, so Karen, the Karen of the fish tank, just killed everybody
sure.
off.
I mean, they might fight briefly where they kind of lock lips and maybe one will damage the other one's lip briefly, but it always ends up with one of them's going to end up the dominant fish and the other one ends up hiding in the corner of the aquarium. Like, and that's when you're like, okay, I got to scoop this guy out and bring him back to the fish store to save
Right.
him, and try something else, or don't try anything else. Maybe you're maxed out.
Yeah. Right. Maybe I only need one fish.
Well, people have that too. I've seen that too, actually. So I mean, you can have just an eel tank. You can have just there's a group of fish called rainbows that are actually more or less peaceful, but they're larger. So because of how kind of disruptive and fast they are, you don't put them with the little guys. It
Okay.
For the most part, like if one fish fits another fish's mouth, that's lunch. So that's your first rule of thumb. You know, that's guaranteed. No matter
Got
what,
it.
saltwater, freshwater, that's solid. That's
Try not to have fish that fit in each other's mouths. Got
yeah.
it.
That's just we're feeding the other fish to the fish. That's all
Oh,
that's happening
I
there.
mean, that seems wrong to me.
And people do that too. They have the larger, like Central South American cichlids, for instance. People come in and buy goldfish to feed them all the time. I don't recommend it. It's one of those things that's actually not the best thing for them. Goldfish are not they're a mutated version of a carp. They're not
Right.
natural. That gold
Right.
colors totally. Really it's just like how dog food is, how they spend a
Yeah.
lot of money formulating good quality foods and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
Same thing with fish food. They spend a lot of money formulating good quality fish foods, and you get the pellets and you get the things like that that are made for them specifically.
Don't
So
feed him another fish. Okay.
I, they'll eat it, but it's not really the best thing for them. So,
This is just so fantastic. I'm not going to say it makes me actually want to go out and buy a fish box, but I'm saying, you
it's
know,
very relaxing. That's the nice thing. Like once you get it going and everybody's kind of dialed in, I mean, it's proven that it reduces your
yeah,
stress. I mean,
yep, yep.
and we have two cats, and the cats were just sitting right in front of the aquarium and they're locked in the whole time. So
Oh, sure.
that was pretty fun too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The cats. I'm not sure the dogs would think it was cool, though. I'm just a little
Sure.
worried about that.
Well, and that's one of the things too. Actually, that reminds me because the cats they messed up a little bit of my canopy that I had on it. So the stands, that's a whole other thing. It's like where are you going to put your aquarium?
Right.
These things are 8 pounds per gallon for
Yep.
freshwater and like 8.5 for saltwater. So if you live on a second floor or third floor where you're not sure about the stability of your apartment,
Mhm.
you don't want to maybe to get a 100-gallon aquarium because I mean that's about 1,000 pounds when you add your 100 gallons of water. Your gravel is
Yeah.
going to be another 100
Yeah.
pounds of gravel.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about a pound per gallon for your gravel. So that's a lot of weight. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah. And don't put it on top of your TV.
Never, never, never. It's yeah, that's electronics and water bad. That's
Bad.
definitely not
I'm
a
just
good
saying. I'm
combination.
feeling like really bottom level. Don't put it on top of your TV.
And so, I mean, basically, I mean, most people just end up buying a stand. If it's a 10-gallon, you can put them on a counter or something like that. It's not that big a deal, as long as it's flat and stable.
Mhm.
Yeah, otherwise, people will just buy a kind of stand. There's canopy options you can put up for kind of nice, making it nicer,
Mhm.
kind of woodwork type stuff that kind of frames it off, makes it look like part of
Mhm.
the furniture.
Mm.
People put them in walls. I mean, we've had a lot of custom people where it's literally built into the wall, and you
Yeah.
maybe have like little cabinet doors that you access it from the back, so you can get to your filtration and things. So uh,
Okay.
there's a
I
lot of fancy ways to do
I'm
it too.
seeing it as a centerpiece in the middle of my ginormous dining room table. I think that could work.
Sure. Well,
No,
It's
huh?
funny you should mention that. Well, it's not that it can't be done, honestly. I mean, I worked at a store in Sherman Oaks, that California, that they specialized in all the custom stuff
Hmm.
for. I
Hmm.
mean, if you had the budget for it, they'd do it.
Sure.
The taller you go with an aquarium, the more expensive it's going to get because the thicker the glass has to be.
Uh,
So
okay.
that's the big thing as far as your cost. I mean, you can see a huge jump in price just by going a couple inches higher sometimes.
Oh,
So
interesting.
so
So,
it's
in
always
other
better to go longer
words,
and lower.
okay. And what is a normal height? Like, what is a normal, how tall is a normal aquarium?
From 18 to 24 inches is pretty standard. I mean, you have a lot of choices, and depending on the size you get,
Hmm.
like a 10-gallon, I believe, is like 18 inches tall, or maybe it's 12. I forget. I forget. I used to know all my measurements. Like I was like had it all up here, but it's been years now. But
Been a minute.
I know like 60-gallon tanks are 4 foot long. 100-gallon
Mhm.
tanks are 5 foot long. I had a
Okay.
125. I used to 125 long because there's also a taller one. Um, it's length times width times height divided by 231 gives you how many gallons your aquarium is. So
Math. There's
that's one thing to
math?
figure out.
Come on, already it's bad.
They'll figure it all out for you.
Oh,
You're
good.
going there. You're going to tell them I want a 60-gallon, I want a 50-gallon, a 40-gallon, and you can see that they usually have a lot of more on display events, so you'll be able to
Okay.
tell kind of take a measurement of your area before you go into the fish store to buy it. Say
Right.
I have a 3 foot space, so then hey, this tank will fit. So
Hmm.
that's pretty important. And then you want your aquarium, your stand. If it's a 3 foot tank, maybe you have like an inch on each side because your wood's going to kind of hang over a little bit, kind of thing. So
Hmm.
give yourself a little bit of leeway as well.
And it
And
needs
then
to be
anything
by
next to it,
electricity.
exactly. And I was about to say, and maybe not buy anything electric would be.
Well, but do you have to plug anything in?
Oh yeah, yeah. For the aquarium, you're going to need a few plugs for sure. I mean, you have
Yeah.
your lights, your filter, the heater.
Right.
All those things are going to plug in for sure. So
So it has to be, if you have a wall with no electrical outlet, that's probably not going to do it.
yeah, that's not ideal for sure.
Okay. That's that was what I was. I'm like, eh.
That's a good
And
point.
what about? So here's a question that is interesting to me: natural light. So do I want it by my window or no?
No, for two reasons.
Okay.
One, it can heat up the water past to where it should really ideally be,
Right.
and two, you're going to get a lot of extra algae growing because of it, and it's going to make you
Hmm.
have to do a lot more extra maintenance to try and keep the algae off the sides of the aquarium.
Hmm.
And now, it kind of goes back to the heater. I mentioned that earlier. The heater is not there always just to kind of keep the tank like just warm it up all the time. It's for stability. So if you live in an area where it gets pretty warm, say you're in Arizona or something, and it's just hot all the time,
Hmm.
and your aquarium is getting to 80 degrees naturally, you don't want to go above like I think 86 is when bacteria starts dying. So that's kind of your
Right.
cutoff. I mean,
Right.
but they say 80. That's higher than normal. 75 to 78 is considered ideal. But say it's getting naturally warmer, you can't fight that. It's just going to do it anyway. So you're going to bump your heater up to 80 so that it just doesn't fluctuate. That's the most important thing.
Oh, I
So
see.
2 degrees change in a day can actually give your fish ick, which is that sickness, where it looks like they salted them. So it's just stability is the most important thing for sure.
Interesting. So they have to stay a certain temperature and not change temperature.
Yeah, too much of a fluctuation in one day is it's a traumatic thing for them to. I mean, if you think about the ocean, especially saltwater fish, they're even
Right.
more prone to it. Especially ocean is huge; it doesn't change very quickly at all.
Right.
So they're not used to temperature fluctuations at all. That's just not a thing for them. So
Cool. Okay. Wow. So Marty is gonna love to listen to this episode because she loves to blow my brain up, and so my brain is like now exploded. Math. Who knew there was math?
oh well,
Um, okay. What else? Any other final details that people should think about if they're going to do this as their investment instead of going with a furry friend?
Uh, it's just preference, honestly. I mean, the nice thing about the aquariums is that that they're quiet in a lot of ways, except for maybe the hum of your filters and things like that. Even the waterfall sound that you get from some of the
Mhm.
filters can be. I think it's pretty soothing. I used to
Right.
have a bunch of aquariums in my room at night, and it was nice to fall asleep to. So
Right.
uh, and they mix well with every other type of pet. So that's another thing too. You can have them with dogs or cats or anything else, basically.
Hmm.
So
I love
it
it.
really the biggest thing I try and tell people is that the maintenance isn't nearly as bad as you think, because most people's natural tendency is to want to like empty the whole thing out, put the fish in a bucket, clean the whole thing, and sterilize it. And it's like, it's the worst thing you can do. It's actually, if you don't do all that hard work, you're actually doing a better thing for your aquarium than if you did all that stuff. So,
I love it. Excellent. All right. Well, Lance, thank you. I love it. This is great information for people who are looking for a pet, maybe looking to add to their pet collection. So awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. I mean, there's so much more, but it's one of those things that like go to your local fish store and ask your questions because they can help you. So.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you for joining us on the Marty and Laura Show. We're excited to bring you these unique, fun, fact-based conversations about pet health. We hope you'll join us on social. Stop by the website to sign up for an extra tip of the week for your pet. While you're at it, do us a favor, please, and leave a review wherever you find your podcasts. The Marty and Laura Show is produced by Pure Dog Talk, Inc., sound design and editing by Premium Audio Services.